picked tonight to do a fantasy football show. Like if we were talking hoops tonight, shouts to Team USA, by the way, their final 12. But I would have been even more distracted. But the fact is, we're talking football. I'm doing a draft. It's just a football night here on this fine Tuesday. But yeah, I don't trust Ezekiel Elliott because he's missed the whole preseason. I get it. He wants to get paid. But it's just tough for me to see him coming in that Dallas offense and, competing right away when he's missed the entire offseason. He's missed the entire preseason. And Zeke's just not a guy I draft. He went in the first round of this league that I'm in. But, I mean, the smart play is to stay away from Zeke.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's a really good line by Matthew Berry, who writes for ESPN and is a big fantasy football guru. And he says that you can't win your league in the first round, but you can certainly lose it. And anyone who drafted Le'Veon Bell last year will tell you that that is the darn truth. And Ezekiel Elliott is very risky. Now, let's just say he does report for week 1. And let's say he even plays week 1. There are multiple things to consider. One is that he's not going to be ready to play week 1. Whether or not he plays week 1 does not mean he is ready to play week 1, meaning he has not done his conditioning. There's already reports that he's a little out of shape. This is going to be an increased injury risk. I mean, there's just a lot to be nervous about. I would not draft him in the top 5 right now. I just won't do it. He will not be on my team if I'm drafting in the top 5, just point blank, period. Another guy I saw that you kind of mentioned here is Le'Veon Bell, who, as a Jets fan, you're not a big fan of him as a first-round pick, Jason.
I'm a big fan of him, like you said, Ben, just not as a first-round pick. I mean, he hasn't played in 20 months. Adam Gase, who you know very well, is smartly keeping him out of preseason action. He did not play in the Jets' third preseason game. Obviously, no one is playing in the final preseason game later this week before the roster cutdowns. I think Bell will have a great year. Running backs with a lot of tread on their tires tend to fall off earlier in their careers, but Bell taking a year off in his prime, I think he's going to be rusty at first, but then he's going to finish the second half of the year real strong as that safety blanket for Sam Darnold. He's still got the wheels. He can run. The only thing that makes me concerned, though, about Bell is that the Jets' offensive line is not really gelled. They got Khalil to come out of retirement. They got Kelechi Osemele. Their tackles are borderline average at best. And Bell's a very patient runner, so he sits there and he waits for holes to develop. With the Jets' offensive line, I don't know how much that's going to work, but I do think he'll start slow and then come on really strong. He's just not a first-round pick for me,
I mean, completely agree. I think that when you look at Bell, I mean, you're going to be talking about a big talent drop-off from a much better offensive line in Pittsburgh to now the Jets. Adam Gase does not like having a single running back. I think that people are expecting a ton of volume from him. I think they're going to be surprised that Gase is going to run other guys as well. He's not someone who usually likes to have a bell cow back. So I don't see that happening. That's just not his style. It's never been. He'll get some catches out of the backfield, but the fact of the matter here, Jason, is the Jets are just not projected to be a great football team this year either. So there's going to be some game script problems for him. There's going to be games that the Jets are going to be out of it, and he's not going to get the ball, and that's going to make it tough if you're owning him.
Yeah, no, I know it's going to be tough. I mean, look, you look at the top running backs in the league, right? Todd Gurley, Christian McCaffrey, Saquon Barkley, Alvin Kamara. Those guys you all know are fantastic. Another guy who people are having mixed reviews on, though, is David Johnson, because David Johnson was great, then fell off a little bit, was injured, but now playing behind a suspect offensive line in Arizona with a rookie quarterback in Kyler Murray. I mean, if Murray doesn't start to sling the ball, defenses are going to load the box against a guy like David Johnson. I do, though, at the end of the day, think he's primed for a bounce-back year. What are your thoughts on him?
So I think he is the single riskiest first-round pick outside of Elliott. So, I mean, outside of guys who aren't going to report, I think he's the riskiest guy in the first round. I think he is incredibly volatile and similar to a guy like Gurley who, I think is risky for other reasons. In terms of actual play, I think he's a very risky guy because we don't know what we're going to get from him. It's going to be very interesting to see how the Cardinals play this year. If they're a better team this year and they get in closer games, that's going to be great for David Johnson's value. If they're terrible again, it's going to make it much tougher for him to get the volume he wants. I think the system he's in with Cliff Kingsbury is going to be very beneficial. But the truth is we just got to see what he has. And so far everything's been good, but he's still risky. I mean, we just don't know what we're going to get. And I think in actuality, that one of the stories of this year's first round with running backs is that I actually think that we might be overrating the top guys a little bit. And the reason I say that is I don't know if any of the guys in that top tier are going to be solid playoff teams. McCaffrey's on the Panthers, who should make the playoffs or at least compete. Everyone's penciling in the Saints. I personally think the Falcons are going to be much better than people think. And I wonder if the Saints could have a little bit of regression this year. And if that happens, Jason, I think you're going to see all of these top running backs not get quite as much volume as we think. And I think that leads me to the conclusion that that second tier of running backs is really, really strong in my mind. And the two names that jump out to me are Nick Chubb and James Conner. I think those guys are both on teams that are going to win a lot of games, be in a lot of good situations in terms of getting the ball. And I think both of them have a lot in the tank. They're both young guys with a lot of talent around them. So as you mentioned with David Johnson, maybe they're going to be stacking the box. They can't do that with Chubb or Connor because they will throw it right over the top.
Exactly. Another guy I like is Joe Mixon as well, but with Cincinnati's situation a little bit unsettled, Dalton's getting up there in age, no AJ Green, at least to start the season. We don't know if Tyler Boyd is going to continue his, steady incline up the receiving ranks. So on that list, tier 2, Chubb and Connor definitely headline that list. I mean, I had the 9th pick in this 14-team league that I'm doing as we speak, and I took Connor with the 9th pick, and I was pretty happy with that. Getting to a couple of sleepers, though, one big one for me is Josh Jacobs with the Raiders. You just saw the Raiders cut Doug Martin and put him on injured reserve, and now basically it's the Josh Jacobs show. And with the Antonio Brown situation a little bit unsettling there in Oakland, I mean, what do you think of Josh Jacobs out in Oakland as an RB1?
I mean, I definitely am not taking him as an RB1, maybe an RB2. I think you just don't know what you're getting with a rookie, especially on a bad team. They should have a good offensive line. Remains to be seen what the script is like. I think if you're taking him, the two things you're excited about are that Gruden has committed to him as kind of a bell cow back. I mean, if that's actually true or not, we don't know, but that's what he said. And they should have a well above average offensive line. They should have a top 10 offensive line this year. And if that's the case, that's going to open some holes. So I like him. The guy I would really keep an eye on, and his situation is making some people queasy. A lot of people, especially some of the fantasy experts, feel like Aaron Jones on the Packers could end up in a timeshare. He's a guy who I might take a little bit of a flyer on as an RB2. And the reason why I really like him, Jason, is he's got a quarterback who's going to throw him the ball. And if he performs and he plays like an RB1, he has the potential to be a top 10 guy without question because he can catch the ball, he can run it. And I don't think there's anyone on that team, if he plays to his potential, who can really take his reps. Jamal Williams has not been all that impressive. So when you look at him, he's the type of guy who could end up being a 3-down back who gets the ball an awful lot for one of the best offenses in football. And that usually translates to one of the top running backs. So he's a guy who I'm going to take a little bit of a flyer on in some of my leagues.
Oh, absolutely. Do you have any other thoughts on running backs, or do you want to move on to receivers?
Well, I just think that there are a couple guys I'd probably avoid, but we mentioned most of them, so I think we're mostly good to go on to receivers. And I think this is a position that's really one that you need to take very close care on, Jason, because as I'm sure you noticed in your draft, there is a definitive top tier of guy.
Yeah, I mean, Antonio Brown, I don't know why I have him first here. Michael Thomas, I think, is the best receiver in football. He's got Drew Brees, on the back nine of his career throwing to him. He's just head and shoulders above the rest. Obviously, you have Brown, Odell Beckham Jr., DeAndre Hopkins, Julio Jones, Devontae Adams. Those are your 1As. Then you have your 1Bs, the Mike Evans of the world, the Brandon Cooks. We're not going to sit here and bore you with how good these receivers are. I want to discuss some sleepers because there was one guy who was extremely streaky, who was suspended, kicked out of the league, and now is back, reinstated, and that's Josh Gordon. So we talked a little bit earlier about New England's receiving core. You have Demaryius Thomas there, Julian Edelman, N'Keal Harry. I mean, where do you see Josh Gordon fitting into this New England offense? Do you see him putting up numbers this year?
I do like him. He's not as much of a sleeper for me because I think right now, unfortunately, they're kind of baking in his upside into his value. If you look at where he's getting drafted as if he's a wide receiver 2 or a wide receiver 3. And I mean, he just has to be so good to outperform that. So I'm having a little trouble. The guys who I really, really like, I know we both like one of them, so I'll leave them for you. But a couple guys who I think are really good sleepers, who I would really try to get. D.D. Westbrook on the Jaguars. I think people are sleeping on him still. I know he's getting some hype, but I think people are really sleeping on his ability to be a borderline wide receiver one or wide receiver two this year, and that's because he is going to get crazy volume on that team. There's no one else. Their third receiver just went down in preseason week 3. He has no competition, and this is not the Blake Bortles show anymore. He has a real quarterback who's going to throw him the ball this year. I think he could be incredible this year. The other guy who I'm stunned at how low he's going, Jason, is Marquez Valdez Scantling, or as we're going to call him, MVS. He is the odds-on favorite to win the number 2 job for the Packers and is incredibly talented. Aaron Rodgers talking him up. That's a guy to me who, if he wins the number 2 job, you're talking about legit wide receiver 2 for a guy who's going to be drafted around spot 100. That is insane value. I have no idea why he's going as late as he is. I think those two are both guys who I would draft multiple rounds ahead of where they're going in the average draft right now.
Oh, absolutely. I think those are pretty good choices. On this list I have for me is Cooper Kupp, because Kupp was one of the better slot receivers in the game last year before tearing his ACL. And all reports coming out of Los Angeles is that he's even more athletic, which is impossible to think about, because when you tear your ACL, most athletes, you're not the same after that. And for him to come back and be that key cog in Los Angeles' offense, with Brandon Cooks there and Robert Woods, Kupp could garner a ton of catches, especially with question marks surrounding Todd Gurley's health. I think Kupp is an excellent play for fantasy players. And also Will Fuller in Houston, number 2 to DeAndre Hopkins. Deshaun Watson, another year in that offense, getting more and more comfortable. I think Fuller, if he stays healthy, because he hasn't shown that as of yet in the early portion of his NFL career, but I think those two guys are in for huge years if they stay healthy. See, these sleepers have so much risk reward potential, because Josh Gordon, you don't know what you're going to get out of him. Kupp could get hurt again, and Fuller could be streaky. But those are my high upside picks for sure.
I want to add one thing to the Fuller thing. The reason I love Fuller, and I think he's a great sleeper, I wanted to let you have that one, but the thing I love about Fuller is that
share.
Oh yeah, in a 10-team draft, you can get Fuller late enough that he's basically one of your bench players. If you can do that, that is one of the best values you're going to get, because he's a guy who, if he stays healthy, he is an automatic start. He's a wide receiver 2 or 3, depending on his health. That is incredibly valuable where you get him. If he gets injured, he's likely already your backup. So if he gets injured, you drop him, and you know early on. So unless he gets injured midway through the season, in which case, Jason, you've already gotten many weeks of fantasy gold along the way. I think he's one of those guys who you have to really think about your team. So if you haven't gotten your receivers early, not necessarily the best guy, but if you've already got 2 solid receivers, he is a great choice to either fill in a flex spot or to be kind of your guy that you put in at certain weeks. I mean, he's a great start of the season type guy, because you know if you're going to play him pretty much before the week starts. If he gets injured, obviously he's off the roster. So I think a lot of that's baked into where he's getting drafted. His ADP is pretty low. I think he's a great pick. Jason, who are some guys you're not a big fan of?
One for me is Sammy Watkins. I mean, he has bounced around after getting drafted so high by the Bills. Is now on his 3rd team, playing in Kansas City. I mean, Mahomes is electric. We don't know the Tyreek Hill situation, and could be pretty scary. But Watkins just seems like he doesn't have too much left in the tank for me. You have any thoughts on Sammy Watkins?
No, I think he's a good pick. I know you have a couple other guys. Who else are you not taking in your drafts?
Allen Robinson, who, ironically, I talked to you about freaking out that he was available in the 6th round of a 14-team draft. But, as good as Trubisky is and the Bears offense could be, he hasn't shown since he left Jacksonville that he could be a number 1 receiver. So he's not a guy that's really on my radar. And then this is a bit surprising to me, but Jarvis Landry, as good as he is, there are so many mouths to feed in that Cleveland offense between Chubb, when he comes back, Odell Beckham Jr., David Njoku. I think Jarvis Landry is still a heck of a player, but I think his production will fall off just a bit playing out in Cleveland. I mean, do you disagree about Jarvis?
No, not at all. I think those are good picks. A couple guys who I'm going to throw in here. I know a lot of people have